Today I want to share with you 3 literature-related victories of this week. The first happened yesterday. I was sitting here in my office during lunch, and suddenly 5 teenage girls stormed my office, quite literally, threw open the office door shouting, "Emergency, emergency!" I was a little bit nervous, wondered what was going on, and then it turned out that they felt they needed to speak to Mr. Travers, our literature teacher, immediately about a theory they had about the Hunchback of Notre Dame. That was their emergency. Second thing happened in my writing class yesterday. At the end of writing class, we had wrapped everything up, the kids were putting away their books, and one of the boys turned to the other and said, "Again, high five." So I asked what that was about, and he said, "Oh, we came up with a great theory about the Hunchback of Notre Dame." So you can imagine how thrilled I was that they're this impassioned, this excited about what's going on in their literature class. The third involves a writing assignment I collected this week. As I mentioned before, I had my junior high kids read a bunch of Oscar Wilde fairy tales. And one of the writing assignments I gave them was to write a fairy tale, an Oscar Wilde style fairy tale of their own. So I wanted them to include a lot of the thematic and stylistic techniques used by Oscar Wilde. So one of the students, I read several of them last week, they were all beautiful. And one I have now declared the greatest piece of writing ever submitted in the history of VanDamme Academy. It was breathtakingly beautiful and written by an 11-year-old student. But the real story about that is this. A few nights ago, a friend of mine called me distraught over a personal tragedy that had happened in her life. And she called me to talk to me about it, but felt that discomfort of feeling like she was asking me for something and there was nothing I could do. That this was a situation where there was nothing I could really say to make her feel any better and nothing she could do to make herself feel any better. And she was almost apologetic for bringing me her grief in this given that there's nothing anyone can do. But I knew exactly what she was seeking. I understood entirely, and what came to my mind in that moment were these words: "Sorrow, when it is shared by many, is not quite so poisonous after all." That line, that beautiful line that seemed to perfectly capture what we were feeling in that moment, came from my 11-year-old student's Oscar Wilde fairy tale. Now, how we achieve this effect on these students, that they are so passionate about literature and can write so eloquently themselves, although to a certain extent I cannot take credit for this child's talent, but how we contribute to this effect is very difficult for me to convey in a 3-minute video blog. But what I did want to point you to is the blog written by Mr. Travers, my junior high literature teacher, which gives a day-to-day insight into his teaching of the Hunchback of Notre Dame. So you can really glimpse what goes into producing this sort of enthusiasm in the students. And that site is vdainclass.blogspot.com. vdainclass.blogspot.com. I highly recommend it, and it'll help you to see how we produce passionate students of literature.